And Sven has some slides that he would like to show you to assist him today. And he would like you to be interactive and answer questions and ask your questions in the chat. And he will do his best to respond to them as and when there's a natural pause in his presentation. So do feel free to post whatever you like in the questions. And I will hand over to Sven if you'd like to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Amy, and yeah, for hosting this, and of course Julie for putting it on. I actually found out about the conference over a business home ed group. So there's actually a group for home educating businesses. So the parents who have run out their own business. Yeah, I'm Sven. I'm actually originally from East Germany, so that's why I have an accent. If you wonder, I was 15 when the Berlin Wall came down, took my whole life apart because everything I believed, how the world functions, just didn't do it anymore overnight. My career dream died. And I found out that my parents had lived a double life. Under the pressure of the Stasi, the secret police, they basically pretended to be communists. And I found out that they weren't. So by Christmas 1989, my career plan has vanished. My worldview is a lie, and as well, my parents, I don't even know who they are and what they really believe. So I had to basically start rebuilding my life. Anyway, 25 years ago, I crashed emotionally very, very badly. I really just fell apart inside myself. And that's kind of where I looked for a solution that is not necessarily therapy and counseling trying to solve my problem, but actually it is an approach where I can learn how to deal with my emotions in a better way. And that's where I was introduced to emotional logic, which is a process that a GP developed a few years ago, just around the corner from us here in Plymouth. So I'm based in Plymouth now. Been living here for 14 years. I'm married for almost 18, and we have a son who's 10. And we decided to home educate. And I use the same stuff that I use for adults with my 10-year-old. And I will share with you basically some of the amazing transitions and transformation that I've seen since I basically dealt with my own stuff, and how it enabled me to actually help my son deal with his stuff. And that's probably one of the things we're going to discover today is it's not actually about you trying to help your child with their stuff, but actually beginning to learn to deal with your own stuff first. So, because children learn mainly through observation. They look how you deal with stuff, and that's where they take it from. So yeah, I will just share my screen and then go through a few slides. So I've done this. Here's my family. That was basically our wedding anniversary last year in a lovely restaurant. If you ever come to Plymouth, there's a restaurant called Dunya, which is kind of a Turkish restaurant. You have to go there. It's the best food you will ever eat. Okay. It's super, super tasty. It's very, very authentic Mediterranean. So if you ever come to Plymouth, this is the restaurant you should definitely visit. Anyway, so what we're going to do, what I will do is create a scenario, which we all experience. I'm sure we all have experience if we have children at some point. And we will explore this scenario twice. So once I take it through by just taking you as a parent, how do you actually process this? And then we go second round and we ask ourselves, how can we help our child to process the same situation? So that's basically the idea. I will explore basically with you 4 phases of an emotionally safe conversation. And there will be loads of really cool examples. I just shared before everybody joined that my son has the confidence to challenge his dad in saying, "Daddy, I'd wish you wouldn't be so loud sometimes." And he's allowed to do this. And for me, it's always a proud daddy moment when he's able to challenge me as a father, which in a sense is the highest authority that he experiences in his life at the moment. So let's go straight into it. Now, imagine your child is really deeply involved doing something they really, really love. And it's dinner time. Now you as a parent have been in the kitchen preparing everything for dinner. Now it's the time to call your child to come to the dinner table. And you go, some of us shout up the stairs, some of us might go up to the room, but we basically ask, hey, can you just come to dinner now? And we hear a nice, passionate, resounding no. Anybody ever experienced that? I have multiple times. Now, let's use the chat, because what I'm wondering here is, how would you feel as a parent when your child does that? When your child says no, and you literally had just prepared everything, you just want to get on, you want to get the dinner table done and sit together for dinner, and your child says no. How do you feel? Now just put 2 or 3 feelings or emotions that you might actually have in the chat. So it's frustrated, ignored, frustrated, impatient and annoyed, undervalued and disappointed. Wow.
And Leal had a hand up. I'm not sure if that was relevant. Leal?
Man,
sorry, say that again.
I said you had your hand up earlier. Did you want to share something?
Oh no, it was actually just agreeing with Sven when he said like when like the whole dinner thing or whatever the case may be, like they didn't do exactly what they didn't do what you've wanted them to do. This was like totally us last night. So might not be dinner, but like similarly, through the situation.
There are loads of situations like this, and I just picked the one that I feel like most of us probably experience at some point. And it's an easy one in a sense as well. It's one that happens too often. But hey, what we see on this list is one of the most amazing things always is all these feelings and emotions that we actually mentioned are unpleasant. They're not negative. Hear my words here. It's very, very important to not see those feelings and emotions as negative. They are unpleasant and they have a purpose. They are there for very, very good reason. And that's basically, where we go into what I basically help people see. So this is what we call in the emotional logic terms, the emotional life cycle. So what actually happens to you as a parent in this moment is you actually grieve. Grief is not just for bereavement. Grief is every time you lose something small. You go through a process of having unpleasant emotions, and in most cases, we go through this process fairly quickly. However, with our children, when these things happen too often, it gets harder and harder if we don't really understand what is going on here. So this emotional life cycle basically is, we're joyful, we prepared everything, hopefully we did it with good intention and felt good that we have done it now, and now we go to a child and it says no, and we experience as parents a disappointment or feeling hurt or there's a setback. And we go through a process of an emotional shock. We're just like, what? Okay, some people actually do not recognize that first moment of their body being like, what? Because emotions are actually physical states. They're not feelings. Feelings are what your mind connects as a memory to a physical state that you are in. The emotion itself is actually a cocktail of hormones in your body. Okay, and this first shock, if we can learn as parents to recognize that and respond to that, we are less likely to just shout. Okay, and it's a learning curve. Believe me, it's not something that happens overnight. However, so once we go through this process of shock, we basically enter a phase of grief. So grief for me is not an emotion. Grief is a process that has loads of emotions. There is loads of stuff going on. And we've seen it in a list, it's not just one thing, it's multiple things that happen at the same time. And grief, even though Kubler-Ross people who try to use her ideas, try to put it in phases that happen one after another, grief does not happen like that. Grief is messy. Okay, it's always a messy thing. It's just because there's so much emotions going on. And the way out of that is through bargaining acceptance. So bargaining basically is how to communicate. It's communicating to get back what you value, or accept it to let go of something you value. And that's why love is in the middle, because you only grieve if you loved in the first place. There's something that you valued, and that's why you have an unpleasant emotional experience. So how do we process this? So I said it already. So emotions are not positive or negative. They might feel unpleasant, the unpleasant ones, like shock and guilt and anger, or the feelings like frustrated. But they all have a purpose. They are there for us to help us to go through the process. They're basically unpleasant for a reason. Okay, they don't want us to be unpleasant. They make our body feel unpleasant, so we do something about it. And the other thing is, emotions, as I mentioned, are connected to our values. I call it, that's why I use this dashboard, they're like gauges. If the oil lamp goes on in your car, you need to do something about it. You can't just keep driving, because if you do, you wreck it. So if we don't listen to those emotions that we have, we're actually missing the message they are sending. And the message is basically that these emotions are not triggered by the actual event. It's not what your child did that triggers your emotions. It is what matters to you in that story. You want to get on with your day. So was one of the things. You want to be respected, as we seen already in a list. You want to be seen, you want to be valued. Those are things that trigger your emotions, because if they are threatened, that's where we like, don't like this. So here are my 4 phases. The first phase is to create a safe place. Now, I know as parents, that's not always easy, but the useful purpose of shock is actually to stop what you're doing, to find a safe place, and to review your resources. It's the whole idea of having a safe place first, because if we just react, we might just hurt our child, which we then feel guilty about. It just creates another grief cycle. Okay, we just have another grief going on because we overreacted in this moment. So the other thing that's really important is, that's why I can't highlight that enough. Your emotions are not negative, and they're not there to be pushed away. You need to name them and validate them. So if you don't know the full process of emotional logic, it will help you to even just find online a feelings wheel or something, and to actually just look which of those feelings do you actually feel, and to give them names. And that will help you to communicate better, because you suddenly have words, vocabulary. That's so important. We are so illiterate often with our emotions. We just don't know how to communicate them. So one way, for instance, in emotional logic, I used like a set of cards or two, and you can see, so this is basically a real person that laid down those cards for a scenario that they had. And you can just see it's messy. And not even all the emotions, there are 7 of those orange cards, they're not even all used because they don't have to use them all. So step 2 is to make sense of your emotions. It's basically, as you name them, to really try to feel in how do they work together? Is there maybe some confusion in here where emotions are actually confused with each other? Because if that happens, very often we get stuck. We don't know how to move forward. One of the things that you can ask yourself always is, you know, do you have a way how you could actually communicate to move forward? Or do you really feel just emotionally stuck? Because the next step will help you to get unstuck. Okay, but to really become present of that, become aware of your own stuckness, that you have this pattern, possibly emotional patterns. You know, I have an emotional pattern that has to do with my childhood trauma from East Germany, that I end up often in a kind of state of fatigue. I just don't want to do anything anymore. If something has a setback is too big, I really just come to the point like, oh, I don't know, I don't want to do it anymore, and stuff like this. So I lose all the energy. But now that I'm aware of having that constant reoccurring state, I have now a chance to do something about it because I'm validating that state. I'm not saying something is wrong with me. I'm saying there is something that needs my attention. And that's basically where step 3 comes in. Because we talk about grief, I ask my clients and my child and you, what are you losing? When your child says no, what have you lost? Or what are you afraid of losing? And again, let's just put it in the chat. Just name a few things. So one of the things I would say from the feelings could be respect, for instance, just to give you an idea here. Or time. Value and control. Authority. Very interesting. So we can already see it much harder to do that. Losing a train of thought. Oh, Amy, I can completely relate to that one. The amount of times I forget what I wanted to do. Yes, I completely get that. Predictability, I love that too. Because yes, you have a plan, so you basically lose your plan, you know. Now, I want to reframe that word losses. Because they're not losses, they're values. They're the things that you value in that very moment. You count only something as a loss if you valued it in the first place. And that's why that step is so powerful, because it actually begins to self-reflect. What are your values in the scene? We're not talking about your child here right now, okay? We're talking about your values. What are your values? What are the things that are important to you? And one of the things that I do with big words like control is control to do what? I'm beginning to question them. I want to define them more deeply. I want to understand what specifically do those big words sometimes mean. You know, authority over what? What specifically do we mean here? Because the more you are able to deconstruct those big words, the more likely you will be able to actually do something about it. because the smaller these things are, the more actionable they become. You can actually do something. But I encourage you, once you have the time, and I completely understand that in this dinner situation, you don't want to go away and sit for half an hour in a room somewhere and the dinner gets cold. You just want to get on with it. And I had that same situation with my son, for instance. And I did not let him create a safe space time right now, because it's like, no, the dinner is hot and we want to sit down and we want to eat. So we went to our dinner table, and we began to talk about the situation at the dinner table. That was something we did. So we did not let the boundary going that now is dinner time, but we explored the reason for this constant no later or during dinner time. So as I said, you only perceive something as a loss if you valued it in the first place. And these values are yours and only yours. If you ask your partner to set their values, they might be entirely different. These are your personal values in that situation that get triggered. That's why you feel so emotional. You are trying to protect those things. Okay? And that is, for me, where emotional intelligence becomes so powerful. Beginning to realize when I'm emotional, and often the more you practice this, and you can practice it with anything. It's an argument with your partner. It's an argument with everywhere. It's a bad customer service experience. You can keep practicing the same idea with almost any unpleasant situation that you have. And the more you begin to name your losses and values, the clearer you will become about yourself. You will understand yourself better. So now step 4. Now we want to make a plan, because that's the whole idea. We want to get rid of this moment. Now, when we talk about any other situation as well, we wanted to find one of the things I've listed. And as I said, if you take some time, the list can be quite long. And you try to find one thing on your list that what we say is SMART. It's specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and timed. It's the idea of, can I actually do something about this right now, or in a few moments, or in the next 24 hours? Is this something I can really do? And we look for the one thing that is the easiest to do. Don't try the hardest, because you're going to fail, which just creates more emotions. What we want to achieve first is to get back movement out of the stuckness that you might actually experience. And there's just one small thing, and it does not have to be related to your child. Okay? Like once somebody, for instance, had a sense of harmony and calm. If you just feel like I need some space and time for myself, create that space and time for yourself. That's really one of these small, important things. So that's basically what the action plan is all about. And of course, the more you become comfortable, your action plan might actually be like, let's talk to the child and let them actually experience a little bit what my values are. Let them get to know me. Who am I? That's what I do with my son. We talk about things. When he sometimes comes to me and I'm out working, my wife and I both run a business. So when my son comes like, Daddy, can I spend some time with you? Well, he often gets like, sorry, at the moment, I can't do this. It's an action plan for me. However, we can also create an action plan right there. When can we have time together? I encouraged him, like it was a few years ago. This was probably the beginning of this journey, really. He was 4 or 5. No, I think he was 4, and or 3 even. Anyway, we went to nursery at the time, and he just pushed me away constantly. He almost kind of had this phase of like, I hate you, Daddy. And boys do this, and I know that girls do this to mums in a similar age. He pushed me away, and I wondered, like, oh, it's so painful. What is happening? Why is it? And I wanted to bring him to nursery, and he really just kicked off. No, I want mommy to do this. Anyway, I started walking with him, and on the way, I suddenly wondered, like, could it be that he rejects me because I don't spend enough time with him? And I literally asked him exactly that question. And the answer was yes. So we created a completely, I freed up my day. We spent the afternoon together, went swimming and stuff like this. But the other thing I did with him is I encouraged him to not let this feeling of I don't have time for him sit within him, but to actually come to me if he has the desire to spend time with me and tell me, because I might not be aware that he needs time. And that's exactly what he started doing since he's like 3 or 4. He came to me and said, Daddy, can we spend some time together? He's really proactive in doing so. So anyway, these were these four phases that you can do for yourself. Okay, remember, it's not just your child that's emotional, you are. Okay, that's why I want to do this twice, because I want you to first realize if you're better at dealing with this, your child will have a better experience. So are there any questions so far? I had some really cool comments. There was one, I could see one question. Oh yeah, the popular American idiom that we say in response to frustrating circumstances, we say, good grief. You know, could be related to this, even though we never use it like that, isn't it? When we use good grief, it doesn't sound like a positive point in my view. If I hear it, it almost feels like there's a little of angry voice in the process. But yeah, any questions?
I don't know if you're happy for me to speak, Sven, because I don't know if you can see the hands raised or whatever. One thing that I find interesting, and I think I did maybe mention this to you when we spoke, is that you know, I raised my own 7 children, and we had a certain way of doing things, and of course we had our conflicts and our run-ins and that kind of thing. But we're currently fostering a 5-year-old who's got some developmental delays, and you know, he came to us without, you know, sight unseen. You don't know that much about this child, you're discovering as you go. And that's been really challenging because, you know, he will just say no. And he's not like my children. You know, there's certain things that have obviously in his own background that he has certain reactions, and he has control, things that he's trying to control. And that's very interesting actually for me to come, because you don't have the benefit of all that bond that comes from giving birth to this child and having done that whole journey with them and understanding them. You know, you've got something, a child coming in that you're still actually figuring out, and they're triggering those valued based emotions like all the time. I'll give you a good example actually. So the one day he's got some dietary issues, things that he won't eat, very fussy. And I'd offered him some cookies, and he didn't want to have them, which I couldn't understand because I got chocolate and he likes chocolate, but didn't want these cookies. So I said to him, look, it's okay. I'm just going to leave them here. And I walked out the room, you know, and next thing I look, he's got these cookies and he's about to throw them in the dustbin. And for me, it's like, you don't throw those in there, and somebody else will have them, you know, what are you doing? That's the reaction, you know, and so that's when it was such a good example to me of, you know, when you speak about the values, you know, you're triggering like these values that you hold, the things that you hold, is that, you know, we don't throw away things we spent good money on, you know, whereas this child has got no concept of that, and suddenly sort of discovering that you've got this reaction to what this child is doing. So there was like, yeah, it's difficult because you don't have that same bond. So you've got to be careful how you react, because that child doesn't know yet fully that they're loved and secure, so you don't have that to kind of counterbalance how how you're acting emotionally.
Yeah, and you're grieving yourself, Julie, in that case, isn't it? So it's kind of, you're grieving the way you like to mother and to be the parent or to offer care in that case. And it's the stuff that used to work, and you have learned for yourself to express yourself the way you do in the way your children always responded. And suddenly those things don't work. So you lose yourself, kind of your routine, but also the ways that always worked. And suddenly
Exactly.
they don't.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And it's kind of where, of course, then you overreact and guilt comes in. And the purpose of guilt, for instance, is all about learning, about learning how to move forward.
I do like the way you frame that, because suddenly it makes sense. Like if I like to do a certain way, things a certain way in the kitchen, and I organize it a certain way because it works for me and it makes sense to me. And then you have some other family members where they've got a different way that makes sense to them. And so you get, this is out on the counter, then you put it back in the cupboard, and you come back and it's out on the counter, and you put, that you get those kinds of scenarios where each one's trying to push there, and understanding it as a value of, how you're framing that in your own life. And sorry, I don't want to take up all the time here, but when we moved to the UK, our entire family went through a whole difficult time. And I really battled with that. And when I look back with what you're saying, it's because, once again, this was a situation I'd never faced before. So all my tried and tested coping mechanisms failed.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't work. And I, at that point, didn't have the emotional energy to go and sort of think, your coping mechanisms aren't working. You need to find some new ones. I didn't have that. I think it's a bit like where you mentioned about yourself and your own past, and the things that where you kind of, I don't know what your exact words were that you used, but where you just kind of like want to quit. I can't be asked today. I think I'm just going to go and play computer games, because actually that I can manage, that I can control. I can't control the other stuff. So I did relate to that.
So we've got some questions coming up for you now, Sven. Hazel has a chronic pain condition called fibromyalgia, which I can empathize with. I suffer from the same nasty thing, and severe migraines. So she has limited number of spoons. I don't know if you know about spoon theory, but it's a way of measuring out your energy for the day. And she gets them used up. It's also a great emotional strain. She has a lot of grief and frustration, which are related to this particular point. How can this help her?
So Hazel, the thing is, of course, I can't explain the whole method in all depth working in an hour. But basically what the emotional logic method really is a skill set. So you can learn this for yourself. And I think for you really important is to understand your own values, that because you're not just grieving, of course, the erection from your child and the relationship to your child, you're basically grieving a lot the relationship to yourself. Because there are things in your value system you'd like to be able to do on a constant basis, and you just can't because the energy isn't there. So one of the things I think for you is really important to understand your own boundaries, and to, be able and willing to set them when they are needed. Your children, even though they're children, you can't go over your energy. And that's true for all adults. We can't just keep giving, because we just burn out, and it just becomes nastier than it would be if we would be openly communicating to our children they're there. But Hazel, I'd love to, if you want, we can have a conversation another time, and I'd rather go with you personally into the idea, so you can see a little bit deeper what it means, and then you can make a more informed decision.
And we've got a post on the community group as well, so you can explore the conversations in more depth there as well, Sven.
Yeah.
Lay says, is it okay to talk about emotional tension during meal times? You mentioned that you spoke to your son when he didn't come and you called for dinner. I've heard that talking about it later so meal times wouldn't be associated negatively, or is that the case? Would it be better to talk about it immediately?
Well, remember my scenario. My scenario is for the child to come to dinner. So we use the dinner to talk about it. So in that case, yes, it's important to be fairly closely time-wise, because the emotions are still present and it's easier to listen to those emotions. So we talked at dinner time about it because it was literally just happening. Okay, so yeah, exactly did that. We talked about it immediately. And we have, because we all know this type of way of talking about things in our home. So my wife knows it. So we all have a process where we keep each other safe. So we're not just exploding and shouting at each other because of something that happened. We really go exactly through those questions. Hey, how you been feeling? You know, what have you lost here? We literally use those questions in our conversations. And try to uncover each other in the process and then talk openly about it.
Okay, so the next question I've got is anonymous. They've asked, their child has a PDA, whose responses, communication and behavior can be unpredictable and certainly not neurotypical. Could this help? I'm trying to get my head around how this could better help me build communication and relationship with my autistic PDA child. It does sound promising.
So this is amazing, because I've actually worked with families who have an autistic child. And one of the things is that these cards, you know, they have basically the emotions on there. Actually, with children, we often use the ones with pictures on. And one of the amazing thing is that this enables nonverbal communication. Because they can actually, you give them the cards and you say, look, so in this situation, show me how you feel. You give them the whole set, and then they can just go and choose the ones that they feel and put them on the table. One thing that has happened multiple times when I've worked with families around this is that the child, because I validate those emotions, I say there's nothing wrong with feeling angry, for instance, you know, the child all of a sudden begins to talk about how they feel. There was one family, I actually did a trial with the child in a coffee shop. That's how safe this stuff is. Okay, we could do this in a coffee shop. Very, very. The boy was very strongly autistic, so with tics and stuff like this. So it's not just invisible. It was very clear that there were things going on. And you know, in the end, I told him basically, you can use the cards to show how you feel. So in the end of the meeting, he suddenly sat there, holding up the anger card, and I said, like, "Hey, you're trying to say that you're angry." I said, like, so what do you want? What are you angry about? Because we had talked about the values, he said, like to go home now. And his dad sat next to me and said, like, really? What happened? Okay, so yes, it can be very, very powerful to help a child to name those emotions without even being able to say them. Okay. With my son, when he was a lot younger, I have a set of feelings cards, 28 feelings. And what I basically did was just going through them and just reading them out to him and say, like, is this something you feel? No. And just put them aside and have 2 stacks. But at the same time, I tried to listen to the ones that I feel I could explore deeper. So then we just took one of the cards and talked about it. So that helps with literacy by actually naming the feelings first. I hope that helped. And again, you know, be in touch with me. We can have a conversation about this on a one-to-one basis.
That's really good. One of the ones that I encountered, my son's PDA as well, with autism, and he is very good at articulating how he feels. And for example, that scenario that you were just saying about, the child said, he was angry and he wanted to go home. What happened after that? Did you manage to persuade the child to stay, or did you listen to the child and go home? What was the scenario, do you recall?
I mean, the scenario was that we were about to pack up anyway. So we were about to
That was an
go.
easy decision.
But what was happening to the family was, when I started teaching the family the method, what happened in the family was the parents came to me and said, like, we have no idea what happened. But ever since we had this time in the coffee shop, our son comes constantly down from his room if something happens and just tells us, like, I'm feeling angry about this. And it just never happened before. They were suddenly overwhelmed by the child suddenly communicating how they feel. Now, I know one of the challenges you have often with autism is, are they being able to be empathetic? So can they actually feel with you? Can they actually perceive your own feelings in the same relationship? And I think that really depends on the child, and it's a try and error thing. But for yourself to sometimes take the cards out and say how you feel and just show them, you know, could be a way of communicating that.
Yeah. So we've got another question here now. Where did you get your emotion feeling cards from? Are you able to provide that as a resource?
So I'm an emotional logic coach. So this is actually part of an activity pack that we give when we either do training courses, and I love to advertise one if you want to become part of it, where the cards are included. You can order just the cards on the Emotional Logic Center's website. But otherwise, you know, you could run kind of a proper seminar. We go really in depth over 4 weeks, which is 2 hours each, just 4 sessions, or 90 minutes each. But we go really...
I was just going to mention, Sven, that they can find you on the exhibitors page of the conference website. So if they want to get in touch with you and want to go and see what you have to offer, they, you know, just go and look for Sven on the exhibitors page.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. Okay, shall we go for the second round?
Go on then.
Okay, I will not just go through the slides because the slides are very similar. So now let's think about the dinner time again. And what is your child feeling? What do you think is your child feeling? And just name them in the chat. When you say no, when your child says no, you call them for dinner. What do you think your child is feeling? So once again, you know, just keep writing. But once again, what we can see here is they're unpleasant. They experience exactly those unpleasant emotions and feelings. And they're likely different to yours, at least in a more defined way. What the definition of those is, they might actually feel in a very subtle, different way. But for you to become aware of this, that's what's called empathy. That's where it starts. It's beginning to observe your child and feel what they feel, you know, from their perspective. Now, the first phase here, and this has been with my son, the absolute breakthrough. When my son throws doors and is angry and has done this, and I know where he got it from. Okay, before I knew emotional logic, that's exactly how I dealt with conflict. So he went into his room, he sits there and I said, let's talk. I don't want to talk. And I always struggled with, like, oh, how can we start the conversation? How can we start a conversation? And I was like really frustrated about this. And then I realized something through a book from Johnny's Webb called Running on Empty. It's about childhood emotional neglect. And she basically says the first step is to validate emotions and feelings. So instead of just telling them, let's talk, is to actually look at them and say, can it be that you're angry or frustrated? And get a confirmation or not, or let them share what they feel. And you validate that. You basically say, like, hey, there's nothing wrong with being frustrated, because there isn't. Okay, there's nothing in a sense wrong with feeling frustrated, because it means that the child values something and it loses something. So it's helping them to realize that the emotional development of a child begins to form when we validate that their feelings are valuable and they are valid. They're their truth, not your truth, it's their truth. So instead of, what we often do as parents, and I've done this myself so many times, it's like, don't be angry. Don't show your frustration. We want them to not be this. And I was like, since I do this, what my son does, he immediately calms down. The moment I validate how he feels, he calms down. And what it basically creates is a safe space. It creates a safe environment for the child to know, I can feel right now, and it's okay to feel that. And this, I feel safe that I could show this. And that's basically where the second step comes in, is just to really just find out a little bit more what they're feeling. And again, if you don't have those resources that I have, you can use the feelings wheel if you want to. You can download that. There are so many places online. Just look for the feelings wheel, and just name a few of those feelings and emotions. And then, you will see their patterns. Your child has certain patterns. They do certain things over and over again, and end up in the same situation. So, but then ask them, hey, what are you? So with the dinner, what I did with my son is like, hey, I get that, but we need to have dinner now, and let's talk at dinner table. So I did not let go of the boundary that we have dinner. We parents have to learn to keep boundaries up. Boundaries are boundaries. They don't move very much. So I felt like, let's talk. So at the dinner table, what happened there, when we started talking about what he might lose, something amazing came out that highlighted one of the biggest things that my son values. And he told us at some point, and don't get me wrong, this is not a straight conversation, it's not going easily there. You sometimes have to spend the time and keep asking the questions and reframe the question and help guessing the losses. One of the things that came up here was that he suddenly said he just doesn't like to stop things when they're not finished. So he loved building Lego. And for him to be interrupted in a Lego build somewhere that he doesn't like to stop there, that's what frustrates him. And again, what I did with him here is I validated that I really, really like that he wants to finish things. So instead of telling him immediately, but by dinner time, you have to stop. Now I validated first that I really like that he wants to finish his things. And then we started having the conversation of, how could we do this better in the future? How could we help him to interrupt? Because it's not about that he can't finish it, he can't finish it now. So it's helping him to realize, like, having to interrupt doesn't mean can't be finished. That was a learning curve for him. But the other thing was for me to realize and to change the conversation for the dinner table very quickly, because knowing that this is one of his biggest values in that moment is when I call him for dinner, I walk into his room, I look first what he is doing and say, like, hey, great, what are you doing? No, it's dinner time now. And if he responds again with kind of, no, I don't want to, or not yet, or what, really? I validate again that I know he loves to finish things. I help him that I see him as who he is and still leave the boundary in place. I tell him then again, it's like, I get that you want to finish this. However, it's dinner time now. Dinner gets cold. You can finish it after dinner or wherever in your routine the place is. But that really changed the conversation, because I am less frustrated for him saying no, because I know why he says it. That's where the shift happened. You know, I could be calmer because I now understand him better. And he gets calmer because I can validate him better. And he knows that what he values is important. So I basically take the same thing and the same scenario, the same process, and take him through. And that's how he learns. And that's where, over time, he began to develop an amazing skill set of communicating what he feels. Like my wife recently, we had shared something, I don't know, was it chocolate or sweets? I can't remember exactly what it was. But my son asked her if he can have it. And then at the dinner table late in the day, he said to my wife, "Mom, can I ask you something? How did you feel when you gave that to me?" And he wanted to validate whether she gave it to him because she had to, or whether she gave it to him because he willingly wanted to. He validated his own assumptions. And that was like, wow. But remember, this is a journey we've been on for like 5 years now. So I'm not telling you this is an easy thing. With children, it's a continuous journey to go with them, you know, and help them to validate them. Yes, Andre, exactly. You know, I believe if you validate a child and their emotions, and especially I've seen this with autistic children quite a few times, to validate that their feelings are completely okay changes the dynamic. It's just amazing how that happens. So yeah, that's basically my journey. Any further questions? I mean, I know we have only 3 minutes, so.
That was lovely, very thought-provoking. Thank you, Sven.
You're very welcome.
Yeah. Sandrine's saying it was very useful as well, especially with her child with the PDA. Yeah. I'm dealing on the side with a child that's getting quite frustrated because the technology on his Xbox isn't working. So this is quite apt. Have you got anything you'd like to say, Juliet?
Yeah, I think that you know, we can really get into a rut sometimes with these patterns, the way we react to situations, and then we can't find a way to move beyond that, so we get stuck with our children, you know, in this constant conflict. And I think that this is just really helpful, Sven, and really, especially helping us to reflect and actually understand and where we're coming from ourselves, you know, and checking in our own feelings. And I think it's quite interesting that so we've got somebody sharing at the in-person conference who's doing some research on kind of self-awareness in parents. And I've actually said to her, you need to watch today's session with Sven, because I think you'll really find it interesting, and there's some overlap there, which I love in a conference like this, because you get one builds on the other. One thing that I found that worked actually though with this little boy that we're caring for is that sometimes when he gets angry, I say to him, "Are you mad? Are you angry?" I said, "You can show that you're angry like this," and then he normally just laughs. And the situation is totally diffused, because you basically sort of giving him permission, and it's kind of like, oh well, that's okay, then I'm over it, you know. It's but that's maybe more of a flippant way of working on that than what you're saying. And I think you know, that we're used to talking about validating and that kind of thing is incredibly important, and it's part of respecting a child as being born a person like we are.
So Hazel said that she's had constant conflict and this has helped an awful lot. Thank you.
You're welcome. Can I just quickly share a slide for my course? Is that okay?
Yeah.
So just because you're also recording it, so people can just follow it up later on. But I'm basically planning to do this over Zoom, where we really go deep. So I take you through all the phases in a very depth. We talk about the useful purpose of all these emotions, and I will include, you know, those feelings cards, the little ones. And I'm happy to include for everybody from this conference to do the picture cards as well. So not just the orange one. So you actually have more sets at home. But yeah, believe me, this goes deep. Okay. And we will uncover each other a bit more. And it's a small place, so there's just maximum of 10 people in the room. So we have a really nice intimate room for 4 weeks and can talk about things and can go into much deeper things and talk and have questions deeply answered. There are loads of discussions. Every time I do these courses, there are loads of discussion. And as I said, like, it's a very simple method. You get a whole resource pack. You know, it's like this. So I sent us in a post. And as I said, like in businesses, when I run this with businesses for managers and stuff, I charge 250 per person. So, but I think like, no, we're home educating parents. We can do this better. So
I think if it's going to change the atmosphere in your home, I think it's money well spent, because particularly if you know your children aren't at the stage of almost leaving home and you've still got lots of years with this child and maybe still to hit puberty, I think this is something you want to invest some time and money into, to just kind of restore relationship with your child. And it sounds to me like I would love to hear more myself, and I think it's a good investment. So I hope those of you who need it will find a way to sign up for that, and see something transform and change in your families.
Have we got a little bit of time there to go over, Juliet, to get through the last 2 comments?
Yeah, please go.
Yeah. So Amy says, thank you very much. It's very interesting. She's in the habit, she thinks, of validating her daughter's feelings, but she's not very good at being aware of her own feelings. And I think self-awareness is a big thing that we all can tend to devalue. And that the discussion of losses and putting into action a plan in place is something for her to do, and she'll be doing that. Lil says, we've watched this show called Daniel Tiger, which has helped us to parent to be emotionally intelligent, and the kids can also build their EQ. They use songs to help process emotions and transitions, and her teens remember it well from when they were younger. It's available on Netflix, YouTube, and BBC iPlayer. So that's a brilliant little tip there.
Yeah, cool.
Lovely.